Hi, this is Yuri Lowenthal. I play Peter Parker and Spider-Man in the new PS4 Spider-Man game, and you're listening to The Amazing Spider Talk.
Hello everyone, I'm Dapper Dan Gavosden, and I'm the founder and editor of AmazingSpiderTalk.com. Thanks for joining me for a special Amazing Friends episode of the all-new Amazing Spider Talk. I hope you enjoy this podcast and that it provides an intelligent conversation between a fan and a creator as we look at the Spider-Man video game universe in a bit of a bigger picture. Yes, I said video games because as we wrap up our coverage on Marvel's Spider-Man on the PS4, I thought that it would be prudent to talk to the man who voiced Peter Parker, Spider-Man, and Spider-Cop himself, none other than Yuri Lowenthal. Here at Amazing Spider Talk, we've made it part of our mission to sit down with many of the voice actors who've voiced the character Spider-Man over the years, including Paul Soles from the 1960s cartoon series and Christopher Daniel Barnes from the 90s animated series. And I think it's safe to say that Yuri Lowenthal is the latest bearer of that torch and will represent the voice of Spider-Man for a new generation of fans. Remember, this episode wouldn't be possible without support from our wonderful Patreon subscribers, whose patronage allows us to assemble the guests we have on the show and do all of our research. If you enjoy the show and want to help us continue while getting amazing bonus content, like the reviews we do of all the new issues of Amazing Spider-Man or even art in the mail, please go to our show notes and check out our Patreon page and consider joining our team. But I digress. Let's get straight to my interview with the voice of Spider-Man, none other than Yuri Lowenthal.
Writing your memoirs? Don't forget the hyphen between spider and man.
Well, Yuri, I want to thank you for joining me on the show tonight. Welcome to the Amazing Spider Talk, and I'm so happy to have you here today.
Dan, I want to thank you for having a podcast that's all about Spider-Man.
It's absolutely my pleasure. So speaking of which, let's start things off where I guess like most shows all about Spider-Man would start off, which is to ask you, this is a Spider-Man oriented show. I'm curious to hear about your personal history with Marvel and then more specifically, I guess, Spider-Man as a character.
Yeah, I grew up loving superheroes and comic books. And when I was that age, I didn't care if it was DC or Marvel, but I would say when I was from the time I was very young, for me it was Batman, Superman, Captain America, and Spider-Man. Like those were my four go-to superheroes. And I went through stages of life where I was more a Marvel guy or more a DC guy. I think as I started to get older, I became more of a Marvel guy. But there are pictures of me, as young as maybe 3 or 4, already wearing a Spider-Man mask. So I kind of wish that I could go back in time and go, hey kid, it's going to take a while, but someday you're going to be Spider-Man. I mean, not that he would go, oh my God, how did you get in my living room? And he wouldn't understand what was going on. But this really is a dream come true for me. But I grew up, a big nerd, reading a lot of comic books and then collecting comic books as I got older, and playing video games and Dungeons and Dragons. I had a very active imagination landscape. And but I will say that when I got older, I fell out of Spider-Man for a while, so that when we first started working on the game, it had been a while since I had read recent Spider-Man stories. With the occasional one, somebody would say, "Hey, you should really read what Dan Slott is doing or Brian Michael Bendis is doing. This is a really good." I pick up here and there, but I hadn't been following it for a while, so it was really exciting for me to come back to something that I had grown up with, a character that had meant so much to me. I will tell you a little story that I only remembered recently, and that is I used to go to this JCC day camp when I was 5 or 6, maybe 7, and we would during the summer, and we'd go to the pool, and we'd spend a lot of the day at the pool, and they had a high dive. I would always for a long time I'd climb the ladder on the high dive, I'd get up there. There was, a dude, a camp counselor up there, making sure that we didn't fall off and, crack our skulls open. And I would walk out to the edge of the high dive, and I would stand there for a long time, and I'd be like, wow, this looks a lot higher from up here than it did down there. And inevitably I would turn around and I'd creep back, down the ladder. And I did it that way for a long time. One day, near the end of the summer, I went out, and I got to my usual place, and I started to come back. And the guy stopped me, and he said, "Hey, would Spider-Man jump off the high dive?" Without even thinking, I just walked right back out, and I jumped. So, even then, he was an inspiration to me. So, again, coming back to it, to get to work on this game and to get to be Spider-Man and my own Spider-Man, and a Spider-Man, telling a story that Insomniac wanted to tell, that they wanted to be different than a lot of the Spider-Man stories we had seen in media, and to trust me with that. I mean, it was nerve-wracking to have that kind of responsibility, because I worry about that stuff because this stuff means so much to me. I don't want to mess it up. So at first it was nerve-wracking, and then I realized that the whole team were all diehard Spider-Man nerds who had a lot more recent Spider-Man cred than I did. And, Brian Intihar, the director, the creative director on the game, was the biggest Spider nerd of all of them. And I realized in fairly short order that he was not going to let me fail. It meant too much to him. It meant too much to everybody on the team. So that's probably a long answer to sort of a shorter question. I have a deep history with Marvel, and this meant the world to me.
Great. Well, have you taken that dive again into the Spider-Man that you've missed in the years away from the character? Is this something that you found yourself? I hate to say this, bit by the bug.
You can, if you could be allowed to make any terrible jokes and terrible puns, it should be on a Spider-Man podcast.
Yeah.
When talking about Spider-Man. Strangely enough, I didn't to prepare myself for the project, but I have since then. It's funny, I started exercising my library card again for the first time in many years. So kids, that library card is still worth something, because I go to the library and I check out graphic novels. And, I do whatever, trade paperbacks they have of Spider-Man runs. And I just read a really weird Deadpool Spider-Man run, that Isn't It Bromantic run that is super weird.
It is very weird.
Yeah. But it's fun coming back now. Yeah, it has rekindled the fire a bit.
That's really fun. I'm the same way, especially here in Los Angeles, where we both are. The libraries are very well stocked with graphic novels. I don't know if that's just an LA thing, but
I don't know.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So you've had a history in, American animation, anime, video games, and movies that I detailed at the top of the show. I guess I'm curious, with your multifaceted career, how much of a role does voice acting play, I guess, in your kind of day-to-day, career that you're pushing?
I would say it's the majority While I don't say no to any type of acting work. I mean, I still love doing things for TV and film and the occasional play. Voice acting is what pays the bills. And what a thing to be able to say. It is all of that acting, no matter where I'm doing it, all comes from the same place, but it is definitely exercising different muscles and fulfilling different parts of me. So a lot of people say, well, why don't you just do voice acting now? You don't have to do any of that other stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but I like that other stuff. And, if I don't do a play for a really long time, my body like aches to get on stage again. Or, if I haven't worked on a film in a while, like I love those things differently. But voice acting has been amazing to me. And something that I hadn't even considered when I first came out to Los Angeles. I came out here with, the standard plan of let's go, be a TV movie star. And, that doesn't always work out that way. And it didn't for me. But luckily, my wife suggested, hey, what are some other things we could do as actors to make money so that while we're, also doing, the secretary work or whatever, to make ends meet, we could be trying to use our acting as a job. She said, well, what about voice acting? And it was embarrassing that I had not immediately thought of that, because I grew up watching cartoons and, both American and anime growing up and in movies. And, I'm a huge cinephile and playing video games. Like that's the first thing I should have thought of. And I didn't. But so I didn't know anything. Like it didn't even seem like a job that a mere mortal could get. Like I figured, well, there are like 6 people who do that, right? And then that's it. But we took a class, sort of a basic intro class to sort of see what it was all about. And, we just took it from there. And, one little thing led to another little thing. And it grew over time. And we both fell in love with this new facet of acting. And video games grew and animation grew, and there were more jobs to be had. And all of a sudden that was a lot of what we were both doing, with the occasional little, TV spot or whatever in between, or commercial in between. It was voice acting, and I'm okay with that.
And I'm sure something like Prince of Persia was a huge, push forward in that regard.
Oh yeah, that was Prince of Persia was big for me. It was not my first video game, but it was definitely early on in my career, and it was definitely a moment for me. Because people love that game, and I love that game because it was so good. And it was one of my first sort of lead roles in a game, and what a game for it, to have that experience on.
I mean, hell, they made a movie out of it.
Right, exactly. Remind me. So I'm sure someday you and me and Nardeep will have drinks, and I'll tell you my Jake Gyllenhaal story. But that's a story for another time, and I definitely need to be drinking to tell that story. But Prince of Persia was great, and in a strange way, sort of was a prototype for a lot of the types of movements that you would see many years later in the Spider-Man game that I'm doing.
Oh, absolutely.
Wall running and a lot of the parkour stuff and everything is it's crazy how things come full circle.
Well, one of the things I want to be sure to do in an interview like this, especially around a career like voice acting, which I think has a lot of myths surrounding it, especially today where you find a lot of major voice acting roles going to celebrities for marketing purposes rather than to people whose craft is doing voice acting.
Right.
And I think this isn't as much of a problem in video games, but I think it creates this perception that you kind of just, as a voice actor, just show up, read a few lines, and that's kind of the end of it. So I guess before we even get into all
that's what Chris Rock told us at the Oscars, right?
Yeah, exactly, right? And that's probably the most famous and well-publicized behind the scenes of like what voice actors do is collect a paycheck, essentially,
Right.
So to dispel that, can you tell us perhaps what the life and career of a voice actor is like? Like, what do you do on a daily basis in a role like this beyond what we might already assume and cashing a paycheck?
Acting, any kind of acting, but definitely in the voiceover world, is a constant hustle. I am always auditioning. I'm always trying to meet new people and suss out, projects and help my agent do their job even better. And yeah, and a lot of people think that once they get an agent, oh, phew, now somebody else is going to do that work. No, you still got to keep working. And people could say, well, but now you're Spider-Man, or you've done this, or I mean, I guess they could have said it, after Prince of Persia. Don't people just call you and say, hey, will you be in this game? No, I am auditioning all the time. And I'm auditioning for games, and I'm auditioning for movies, and I'm auditioning for dubbing and animation and commercials and promos. You might by now be sick and tired of my voice as the ABC comedy promos guy.
Oh,
I'm the
man.
guy who's like, yeah, I'm the guy who's, for the last year or so has been like, tonight on Modern Family, this and this and that and that, Modern Family, 8:30, 7:30 Central on ABC. Like that's we gotta take a lot of gigs. We can't just, be Spider-Man for our job, and then hope that that's enough. It has been amazing. Don't get me wrong, but it's not like I can sit back on my laurels. So I am, in addition to always hustling and looking for the next job, because here's the thing, the job's done now. We're finishing up the DLC, to be totally honest with you. We've still got a couple more sessions on that to finish that out. But the job is essentially done. We've done all the mocap stuff, all the performance capture, all that. And in this business, you don't have like a year-long contract. You're not like, you don't know that you're going to have work for the next year. So when you show up for work, when you're done with work that day, you're basically fired, or your job is over, and you have to make sure that you have other stuff in the pipeline.
I guess that's a harsh way of looking at it.
Yeah, in a way. It's like any kind of freelance work, really, and especially in the voice acting world, there are a lot of really talented people doing this, and if you think I can just go, oh, I'll just sit back and people will keep calling. No, they'll call if I'm not available, or if I'm too expensive, or, whatever it is, they'll call the next guy. And that next guy is just as talented as me. So it's not like I can say, yeah, well, you can call him, but, if you really want the good stuff, no, that guy is also just as talented. So I have to stay on my toes. I have to keep training. I can't, I have to keep my body fit, because, I have to stay healthy. My voice goes like, I just like you, I came off that week-long cold that was miserable. And the first thing to go when I get a cold, when I get sick, is my voice. So I am always fighting to stay healthy. There's that. Maintaining relationships with people I've worked with before takes time. And then there are I have found in this business, whether it's voice acting or TV, film, whatever, that the actors, it's especially true these days. You didn't have to do this before, but actors who create their own projects and who create their own IPs and tell their own stories and try to get their own stuff produced, because the technology is there that you can do that. You can make your own movies. You can make your own web series. You hook up with the right people, you can make your own video games these days. It really, the actors that really stand out and make it in this business are A, good actors first, not just people with cool voices, and B, they're really motivated to tell stories beyond what they get hired for. So my wife and I formed a production company so that we could start, creating our own content, and which was also hugely empowering. We're constantly spinning all that all the time, and then you got to spend time on yourself. Relaxing occasionally, so you don't freak out every time you don't have work, because that's nerve-wracking as well. So it is, I would like to dispel the myth that it ever gets easy, and the only thing that keeps me going, because now after hearing me talk about it, you're like, why would you do this? Sounds horrible. It's not. I love what I do. I love telling stories in whatever format it is. And that's, for people getting into this, I always tell them that. I say, I give them a lot of things that, that anybody can do to sort of get started, no matter where you live or how much money you have or any of that. And then I say, it's acting first. So try some acting, whatever, whether that's at school, whether it's drama class, whether it's local theater, whether it's, making independent movies with your friends or whatever that is. Try acting. And if you love it so much that you will suffer through all of the indignities, and all of the hard work and still keep coming back because you love it so much, then you've probably got that bug and you've got what it takes to get you through the hard times, because there will always be hard times. And I have had hard times recently, and I'll have hard times again. I mean, it doesn't end when you get a game like Spider-Man. So yeah. There's
a certain amount of enjoying being hungry.
Yeah, and enjoying, even if I'm not making any money, even if when I'm doing, black box basement, experimental theater where there are more people on stage than in the audience, and it's literally costing money to do the show, and I keep coming back every night and I keep auditioning for those shows, there's something that feeds me that, in a way that, just showing up for the bucks never will.
Yeah, absolutely. So, speaking of other work that you have done, you did previous work for Insomniac's Sunset Overdrive. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, did that get you in the door for this Spider-Man role, or was it the kind of thing where it was like Harrison Ford was auditioning, he was in American Graffiti and just happened to be around when they were casting Han Solo? Like, was there an audition process for you, or did they remember you and think this guy would be appropriate for this role?
This is an interesting situation because, I had just worked on Sunset Overdrive with a lot of the same people at Insomniac. And it actually, in the very beginning of the process, hurt my chances. Because except for, my sort of champions at Insomniac who I'd worked with before who believed that I could do this, everybody else said, yeah, but he's the Sunset Overdrive guy. And they said, well, he's an actor. We think he can do this. And they're like, but it's different than the Sunset Overdrive character. And they said, well, that's, an actor they can change. We think he has the potential. And they're like, well, we don't want the Sunset Overdrive character. We need somebody. And so I think, it's the stories have gotten hazy over the last 3 or 4 years. So I don't remember exactly what the deal was, but I think there may have even been 1 or 2 people cast before me that didn't work out for some reason. And then there was an audition process that I had to start with everybody else. I was auditioning with all the other guys who had played Spider-Man and things before, and, new people and, all the people they were looking at. I was in the room, I was auditioning with those guys. And then it kept getting, so I had the Sunset Overdrive thing working against me to a certain extent. And then I had just come off a play or a midlife crisis, depending on how you look at it, where I got a mohawk. So I was showing up to these auditions with a mohawk, which I guess is great for Spider-Punk, but that's not what they were auditioning
right
at the time. So I was like, oh God, and the funny thing about it is that 4 years ago, John Paquette and some of the guys from the Insomniac team came to me and said, look, we're putting our hat in the ring to do this new Marvel Spider-Man game. We want to record a test scene. So John Paquette had written this scene between Spidey and Norman Osborn. And he got me and Brian Bloom, who ended up playing Taskmaster in the game, to record this test scene, basically. And, just to basically as Insomniac's audition for the game. We all knew that my having done that scene did not mean that I was even going to be considered for the role. It was, it was just a job. I was helping them out. They like working with me. Great. And then, a year went by, and then this audition process started going, so you came in and they said, hey, we want to look at you for this. And I came back over and over again for auditions, some just vocal and then some on the motion capture stage to see, how I moved and how I acted in a space like that. And then, they just kept whittling it down, and I was out there with a bunch of really, up against a bunch of really talented guys. And it could have been any of us. Any of us could have come in and knocked it out of the park. And I'm very thankful that it was me. I don't, for whatever reason they chose me. It was great. But any of those guys could have done it. And I love many of them and work with many of them and hang out, and drink with many of them on a regular basis. So it's a very supportive community, the voice acting community, in a way that I have not found in the on-camera community, to be honest. And I love my voice actor community, and we'll be up against each other again, and for for every one that, for this one that I got, there'll be so many that I wish that I got and that I won't get. But that's, them's the breaks.
Even in the auditioning process, did they seem to have a very clear idea in mind of what this interpretation of Spider-Man would be like based on the questions and things they were having you do?
Yeah, I think they already had an idea of what they wanted to do, what they wanted, what Insomniac's Spider-Man was going to be. And yet, that said, that character changed and grew over the course of us making the game, just because of the way that the turns the story took, and just what I brought to the character, and when they brought added additional writers, what those writers brought to the character. I mean, it wasn't until Ben Arfman came on as another writer that we got Spider Cop, for example. That was not an original idea. That wasn't originally in the script. So it's interesting to see how a game will change and because it takes so long to make a game, things just change by necessity over time. But they had an idea. They wanted a Spider-Man that had some experience. They didn't want to tell an origin story again. They wanted a Spider-Man who was wrestling with different things, emotionally and in his life. They wanted a different relationship with MJ. They wanted, Spider-Man to have this crisis because oftentimes we forget that Spider-Man, that Peter Parker is a brilliant scientist, and he was brilliant that way first before he was Spider-Man. And the idea, and it was one of the things that really excited me about the story when they were talking to me about it early on. They said, look, Spider-Man's at a point in his life where he's starting to wonder if he can't help more people as a scientist than as Spider-Man, and is continuing to be Spider-Man the irresponsible choice for him. And I went, oh, wow, let's tell this story. So
yeah.
So it was exciting to see the character become the character that ended up the one you saw in the game over the course of 3 years.
So what was your reaction like to finally confirming your role as Spider-Man in this game? And I guess, how has that feeling changed as the success of the game has become so apparent?
Oh, God, I was so excited to finally be able to say it, because we had already been working on the game for a couple of years before they even dropped that original trailer with my voice on it. And people who were familiar with my work immediately reached out to me or said congratulations, or hey, I just want to confirm that's you. But Insomniac was still sitting on all the names of the cast members, so I couldn't say anything.
Oh, man.
For like a year after that trailer came out. So people, I just had to ignore those questions on Twitter because I didn't want to, just out and out lie. It was also hard keeping that under my hat because I wanted to tell the world that I got to wake up every morning and we didn't work every morning. It wasn't an everyday kind of job. We, especially in the beginning, we would, I'd come in, we'd do a motion capture session, and then a couple of months later we'd do another one. I wanted to tell the world I was Spider-Man. Luckily I could tell my wife because she also ended up, getting a role in the game. But ironically enough, or weirdly enough, a character named Yuri, which was still weird when I have to refer to a character named Yuri. But it's, I know it's also my wife is still odd.
What are the chances of that? You know, and Yuri's a rare enough name.
Exactly. And people are like, oh, did they name that character? Because I'm like, no, she's canon. Like, she's from the comics. Like, but wow, I don't even remember did I answer that question?
Sure. I guess I'm curious, like, how, like, you were overjoyed to get the role, but has that feeling changed as the success of the game has become?
Yes, and I'll tell you, I alluded to this earlier, I think, a little bit. I spent 3 years worrying if I was going to screw up Spider-Man for a new generation of Spider-Man gamers or, consumers of Spider-Man. I had no idea. Well, we thought the game was great, and the closer we got to the game releasing, the game just kept looking better, as opposed to, sometimes you work on a game and you're like, I don't know if this is going to... But then again, we had also felt that way about Sunset. And so, this is Spider-Man, a lot more, in Sunset Overdrive, nobody ever heard of that before. But again, the mantle of this character who is so beloved, and that I cared so much about getting right, it had me pulling out my hair for the last 3 years until it came out and people said, you know what, you did a good job. I was worried until, and I try not to read much in the way of reviews, because if you read the, if you believe the good ones, you have to believe the bad ones. And I'd just rather sort of, hey, did I have fun doing it? Awesome. Then it was great. But, I have obviously, people have reached out to me on Twitter and said how much they've enjoyed it and, what it's meant to them and, emotionally how they connected. And I could not be more thrilled. I'm so proud of this game and the work that everyone did. So I was excited when I got the role. I was terrified through most of the time I was working on it. And all that excitement has been dwarfed since people have been enjoying it so much.
So I have to assume that the next step after getting the role was to really work to refine and define the voices of Spider-Man and Peter Parker. Can you speak to this process and how much creativity and input you were allowed in defining that role? And on that note, what were the objectives that Insomniac and Marvel set out for you in that regards?
That was definitely something we crafted together. Like I mentioned before, they had an idea of what they wanted, basically. And that came out in the writing and, the character they were creating. They wanted all the familiar things that people loved about a good Spider-Man story. But they wanted it to be a Spider-Man story that nobody had really seen before. So that's a tall order. But I think they did a great job. We did work on it together, especially in the very beginning. We spent a lot of time. Brian Intihar was in the room a lot. Later in the game, he had bigger fish to fry, but he spent a lot of time. And creative directors don't come to sessions generally. The voiceover director is there, and maybe a producer, occasionally a writer. They were very loving with this procedure, and it meant a lot to Brian personally. And so he and John Paquette were in the room a lot, along with the voice director Chris Zimmerman, who also directed on the motion capture stage, and dialing in exactly, the Peter that they wanted. And then, and I'm glad that you said the voice for Peter and the voice for Spider-Man, because they wanted those voices to be different. Because Peter talks to Aunt May a different way than he would talk to Wilson Fisk. And yet, when Spider-Man's swinging around and he gets MJ on the phone, it's basically Peter, but so we spent a lot of time drawing those lines, and Chris Zimmerman was very good about, and Brian, when he was in the room, being there, that if I had a line that was a Spider-Man line and I gave it a little too much Peter, or a Peter line that I was a little too Spidey on, that they would stop me and say, hey, that's remember it's Spidey, not Peter right now. Because when Peter gets to be Spider-Man, he gets to live a whole other, he gets to be a different person. It's still always Peter, but he gets to act differently, and he loves it. So we wanted that joy and that excitement, but still, the smarts and the care, the caring person that Peter is. So it was in the beginning, it was about dialing that in. It was also, I'm sure you've read or even noticed playing the game, that, and this was not something that they had decided at the very beginning of the game. This was something, as we were already pretty well into the thick of it, decided to do, was this idea that because there are some free-roaming elements to the game, and they didn't know whether Spidey would be walking around or, perched on, the side of a building, or swinging, madly through the air, they decided to give a different flavor to those two different kinds of reads. One would be a little more efforted, and one would be a little more relaxed and calm. And we had to dial that in too, because I'd always thought of that. When I would play games, I would, if you're in the middle of a fight and it's just a sort of a casual read, it always stood out to me. But I always knew, making games is complicated. You can't just have the lots of different reads you never know when it's going to pop up, and how do you program that? This is all magic to me, even today. So dialing in these two different reads, at first it was too efforty, and the notes that, sometimes I would get notes early on that were like, remember, he's Spider-Man. It's not that hard. You're sounding a little constipated. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, we don't want Spider-Man to sound constipated, obviously. So we really had to dial in exactly how much efforting was enough to be able to tell the difference. But, it didn't sound like he was really working that hard. I mean, this is something he's been doing for a while. But that was exciting for me it was a lot more work because to get that sound in the booth, I have to move my body around in a way that is, if you're just looking at me, I must, I look like a crazy person, but hopefully, translated well to what it sounds like. And it was fun. It was fun in the end, but a lot more work for sure.
Well, you beat me to a question that I had. That was a really amazing thing. And I was really kind of interested to hear your opinion on in that regard to, a question I kind of talked about earlier, which is that people don't know much about the behind the scenes of voice acting, but just, somebody kind of revealing that one thing very early on, it kind of gave players and people who are interested in the game like a big reveal of just how much work goes into voice acting. Can you speak to that, like what it's like to kind of have people appreciate the behind the scenes effort?
I love it. It is. This is in many ways because you never see the person. When you see somebody who's been in movies, you're like you see them. There's a different kind of connection. But when you hear somebody and you don't really have a face for it, it is easy it's harder to appreciate, I think, all that goes on. Now we have a bunch of nice bennies from that. We don't have to show up at 4:00 in the morning, in sub-zero temperatures and get makeup and hair done and have to do, rehearsals and, all this stuff and then shoot all broken up. I mean, voice acting in that respect is a cushy deal. You get to stand in a room and, a nice air-conditioned room or a warm room, depending on how the weather is outside.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do all that other stuff. But we also don't get to use our face and our body as a way to help tell the story to you. Unless, we're performing on the performance capture stage, which is something that when I first started doing this, I didn't do at all. And is happening more and more, especially for video games. And they're starting to cast actors in a different way, not just listening to their vocal performance, but how do they perform physically, which is exciting for me because I started in theater and it's coming full circle again. And it's been a lot of fun being on a stage working with other actors at the same time, because most of the time I'm just recording solo in a booth. But even when I'm behind the mic, I'm acting my heart out and I'm moving my body, but still having to keep, in front of the mic, to try to get that, get whatever it is I'm trying to get across through just the sound of my voice. And then, of course, the magic and the thousands and thousands of hours that animators put in after that, and, designers and coders and the musicians. I mean, the music is such a huge part of this game. I basically play City of Hope over and over and over, like on a constant loop, like all the time. It just makes me feel better about my life and the world all the time. Yeah, a lot of it's still a lot of work. We talked about the work that goes into this as a career, but yeah, even just the acting part, those scenes, people talk about, and again, I've been gifted with some of the most amazing writing I've ever gotten to work with in any medium on this game, and that makes our jobs as actors so much easier. But, people have talked about, particularly in this one, how they connected emotionally to certain scenes. And how did we do that? We did that on the stage. Like, the scenes with me and May, I'm there with Nancy Lenari, who played May, and we're looking at each other and we're doing the scene. And I'm there with Bill Salyers as Otto Octavius, and he's one of the most talented actors I know. And I was so lucky to get to work with a lot of these people. And, the gift of that writing and getting to work opposite those actors as we do it was why we got those types of scenes, why we got those types of performances, and was thrilling for me. And it's some of the best work I've ever done.
Well, you've led me into my next question, which was going to be about those two exact scenes. You are, really your emotional performance was really something else in those scenes. And I can't separate, obviously, how much is your face performing it. But even just in the voice, Peter is being pushed. And this light spoiler, or maybe even heavy spoilers.
Yeah, how spoilery is your podcast
Well,
at this point?
I'll put a warning up. We've already done a full review of the game, so
Okay.
I think people should expect it. But in those two particular scenes, in one, Peter is essentially being pushed to a place he's never been pushed before, which is that he might have to kill someone, and he's like almost ready to do it. And that's a character at a breaking point. I guess I'm curious, like emotionally, how did you get to a place like that to deliver lines with that kind of intent?
Well, I will tell you, obviously, because we did it this way, I don't know how another way would have worked. But if we had been doing it traditionally and I was just recording my stuff and Bill was just recording his stuff separately, a week later or, in another room and Nancy was doing her stuff later, I don't know that we would have gotten those performances. Having those actors looking at me while I was doing it and hearing their emotion and where their character was enabled me to go to those places. And that's something I think you might only get on, when you have two actors opposite each other acting their hearts out like they would on stage or, in front of a camera. It's funny. I also, in a weird way, my son is almost 2.5. So he was born during when I was working on this game. I don't think that, and this is something I've only recently come to terms with, I don't think I could have played this role in the way that I did before becoming a father. It is opened me up emotionally in a way that was not accessible to me before I was. So it is very interesting. It was good timing in that way, and I guess when he's old enough, I'll have to thank him for that. In a way that he'll understand later. But it was a lot of things coming together at once that I think made that possible. It was the writing, it was those actors, it was the directing and the space, the very safe, creative space that they created for all of us. There was never any just shut up and do the lines moments, not once throughout the whole process. It was very give and take, and it was as an actor, that's not something that we get everywhere. People have a bottom line and they've got to get a game out on time and they've only got so much money and, the director's wife left them a day before and, they can't separate themselves from the work. It's a million different things. I give a lot of credit to Insomniac for creating that type of workspace. And then, of course, for doing an amazing job casting, great actors to work with. So it was a lot of things coming together. But a lot of things that you shouldn't be surprised, like, oh wow, really? When you put good actors and good writing and money behind a project in a safe space and time and things. I mean, hopefully you do get something like this, but it was a very singular experience for me.
I don't know if it's that sure of a bet, or Hollywood would do it more often.
Sure. That's okay. Good point.
But that's my way of complimenting you. Not related necessarily to your work, but I'm curious to get, because I just talking with you, someone who's worked through that scene with Otto, I'm sure many times, I've really struggled with the scene because I feel like Peter's decision in that scene is fairly understandable. He sees this twisted father figure and ultimately says I'm not going to kill you and I'm not really going to I've run out of empathy to continue on with your plight and it might cost me in the long term, but I just can't keep this going. But Otto's a little more complicated. He seems to be both attacking Peter with the idea of responsibility while also feeling superior to others.
Yeah.
But he also expresses the idea that he might be under some kind of mind control before seemingly also maybe casting that aside, that it was all a ruse. What is your take on that scene in regards to kind of Otto's final ultimate destiny? I
feel that the whole, it's controlling my mind is still him playing me.
Yeah.
Is still him playing on what he knows, the person that he knows that Peter is. And the only time he would, honestly, I believe that if he had stopped before he said, "And remember, your secret will be safe with me," I think Peter probably would have gone and tried to help him, maybe tried to help him escape, maybe hidden him, protected him, something, because he loves him so much. And even, with that betrayal, I think that if he felt, that he's like, right, I promised I would never leave you. And, remembering all the good times. And then, Octavius fucks it up with that last, he pushes it a little too far and it shows his true colors and, the person that he's become. Now, we'd all like to believe, I think, that Otto, without this degenerative nerve disease and the work that he did and, without the horrible relationship he's had, with Norman Osborn and like all the things that he would be just as positive and supporting and loving a person as Peter is. But he's had hard times, and then he messed it up with some of these experiments and it pushed him too far. It's not all on Otto, I don't think Otto chooses to be evil. I don't think any villain chooses to be evil. They're just doing what they feel they got to do. But it is that last moment, I think, that breaks it for Peter. I think he almost had Peter back and he messed it up.
Yeah. And Otto, I mean, like even eventually we find out that he, has this secret like apartment where he's rounding up supervillains, even before all of this, Octopus Man stuff, he had greater plans to do something truly dangerous in the city. And I found all that stuff very interesting. Otto's stories are kind of like a dime a dozen. You get like a rare one like Superior Spider-Man that pushes the character into new territory. And, this story presents itself from the beginning. It's like, okay, we're going to watch him become, Dr. Octopus. But there's so much more to it than that. And I found that really refreshing.
Great. That makes me extremely happy. Yeah, and the thing is, you know how it's gonna end, but like any good horror movie, like when that guy's gonna jump out. You know that there's gonna be something there, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that you know. In fact, it makes it worse. And the suspense is just painful, at times, because and you see the car crash coming and there's nothing you can do to stop it because you know how this ends. But the details along the way that we hadn't seen before made it that much more riveting. And
I'm sure Norman's fall from grace will be equally painful.
Right? We can only hope.
Well,
man, I hope that, I think it's still too early for anybody to have come and said, hey, so Yuri, we've got another game. Like, I can only imagine they'll do a sequel, between you and me and whoever's listening to this. I can, when a game makes money like that and sells that many copies, they're going to want to make another one. But I wish I knew what they had in store. I hope, I can assume, I can hope they'll call me again, but I don't know. I don't know what their next plan is.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe they'll do Superior Spider-Man and they'll want someone with an eviler voice than yours.
Exactly.
You never know. So back to your work, you expressed this kind of discussion about like how much energy and actual like physical acting goes into your role, and not to out you here, but you're twice the age of Spider-Man in this game.
I don't think that's a secret.
Yeah, can you talk about like what it takes to, I guess, de-age your voice, and I guess like how much the age of Peter really went into the work that you were doing and how it impacted what you were doing?
Well, thankfully, I have a younger sounding voice. I always have. And when I was a kid, I used to hate it. You hate the sound of your own voice when you hear it played back for you.
Sure.
But I was like, I sound like a kid. This is horrible. People never take me seriously. And then I started this, doing this kind of work, and people started hiring me and paying me to, play, 17-year-old, 15-year-old, kids for a living. And I'm like, maybe this is not so bad after all. So I didn't really have to do a lot with my voice. I mean, there's so much of the Peter that I ended up creating is just me. And I think maybe that's what ended up, part of what ended up, getting me cast, is they're like, wow, he's got a lot of what I think we want sort of naturally in his voice. So that I didn't really have to push for that. Now being, 47 or 40. What was it? 44 when I started doing this game. Doing the physical stuff. I thankfully I have some amazing stunt doubles who do all the Spidey stuff. Like whenever Pete's just doing Pete stuff or being awkward, or whenever Spider-Man's just sort of standing there in a cutscene or walking around, and the curry scene, the chicken curry scene and all that. That's me. But then anytime Spider-Man does something really wicked cool, that's either Ross Constam or Seth Austin, for the most part. Ilram Choi did some of the, like the gameplay stuff early on. I know they recorded a lot of his movements for some of the action stuff. But thankfully, in this type of work, I didn't have to show up on a movie set and have them go, "Oh God, no, you look far too old. You can't play this role." Or even, I never would have made it into the audition room. And that is one of the hugely empowering things about voice acting over other forms of acting, is it doesn't matter what I look like, and yet that rules every other type of acting. It doesn't matter how talented you are. You are going to be looked at and judged, and I was not judged on that. I was judged on the performance that I gave and not what I looked like. So I will always have voice acting to thank for being that blind in that respect. And then for something like this, getting to work with people who do the stunts and do all the the parkour and the flipping and all the cool stuff like that, to then bring their performance and then my performance together. That's how you get Spider-Man. I couldn't have done that on my own. Even if my voice sounded right, I needed to work with those other people to give you the Spider-Man that you got.
When you play the game, I imagine you've played the game, yeah?
Although I'm terrible. Like I've been not as much a gamer in recent years, just because I've been concentrating on other things, and I hit myself with massive waves of guilt whenever I sit down and start playing. I'm like, shouldn't you be working on that script, or didn't you say you were shouldn't you be doing this? So I have played, but I'm like 3% completed right now. I mean, it's exciting and it's fun, but it's slow going because I'm terrible.
So my question is, I guess in that limited amount of time, I guess the question would be, what is it like using a controller to manipulate yourself in some way? And are you able to, having worked on the project and been a part of it, like, are you able to see the fantasy of it, or can you see all the pieces fitting together, as you're playing? You're like, oh, there's my line I recorded. I have a memory surrounding that. Because I could see a version of you where you're like, oh my God, I just heard myself say a line and now I'm flipping over a guy's head and that's really fantastic. Or there's a you where it's like, that was me in a recording room. How much of the fantasy do you get caught up in, and how much of yourself do you see in that?
There are two parts to this. One is that as an actor, when I'm playing it, or watching myself, something I've done or whatever, I pick it apart and wonder why anybody cast me, and I probably will never have a job again. Like I'm super critical. I'm like, as I'm playing the game, I'm like, oh, they chose that take. Oh wait, did I not give it better? That was what I did that. That's so wrong. So that's unfair. That's on me. That's me and my headspace. But the other answer is there is still magic in it for me. I still get caught up in the fantasy of it. And even though I know, I was on the inside of the process and I sort of know how the story ends, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't come fully together until you're playing it. And that I could not have foreseen. I didn't, get to see a lot of that stuff until I was playing the game. And a lot of the story really only comes together when all of those elements are joined. And I've even watched, sort of the cutscenes back to back, and you don't get the whole story that way. You have to play the game. So much of the storytelling is in, and the character development is in the gameplay and in those moments while you're playing, in between the cutscenes. So there is still magic in it for me. I can still get lost in it, and it's still super fun.
Where do you see yourself in the performance the most? I mean, like, Peter Parker doesn't necessarily look like you, but I'm sure he still maintains a lot of the expressions and physicality that you expressed when you were doing the motion capture. Like, can you recognize yourself in that person?
In certain moments, definitely. Little motions or things that really stuck with me, from the day. There was one that stuck out to me the other day early on when Otto and I have just completed an experiment, and he says, "Look, I can't pay you," and I say, "Look, I don't care about that." And I remember on the day it's such a beautiful working with Bill Salyers. I can't say enough good about this guy. I remember hugging him in the scene, and then he sort of started to pull away, and there was a moment where I wanted to go back for more, and I remember feeling that in the moment. And I'm like, well, I don't, thinking about it later, I was like, that's the kind of stuff that usually gets lost in in animation or whatever. And I remember seeing it in that cutscene, and it brought back, a lot of emotion and memories because Pete, he just, he's been so long without a father figure that he'll quite literally in that moment tried to hold on to it for longer than it was there for him. So it's exciting to see moments like that, and those are the moments when I go, oh, good, oh, okay, yeah, no, that's really nice, as opposed to most of the time when I'm like, oh, you're a terrible actor, which is a horrible thing to say to yourself.
One of the things I've always been curious about in regards to voice acting in games is the script. Like, there's so many lines and so much dialogue. Like, how is something like that formatted? Do you just get a book of context-free lines, or is someone there literally coaching you line by line through the context of all the recordings you're doing?
There is, thankfully, because it is a huge thing, and it's very easy to lose track of where you are in the game, and what a lot of these lines mean and how they connect down the line, because you can't see the bigger picture as the actor most of the time. You can have read the script and they have told you the story, but there's so many little details and side missions and things like that. It's very easy to lose yourself, and that is a big job of the director, Chris Zimmerman, who was always there to answer those questions. Sometimes John Paquette or Ben Arfman were in the room to provide more context, or they'll often have a producer. If another writers can make it there, producer will be there to answer those questions, because that's not always. A lot of my scripts just look like one line, and there's another line, and then there's another line, and I don't even know what the context is, or if I'm in a conversation, like I don't have MJ's lines, there, or I don't have Otto's lines. So a big part of those sessions and the director's job is to make sure that that the actor has that to work with.
I'm just trying to imagine you reading these lines about these chemical puzzles that you're doing. And I'm like, I would have no idea what I was talking about without the context of where I was at any given time.
Acting.
Yeah.
I didn't always either, but when it was important, they were there to save me.
Sure, and those are not the most important. One of the things I on that related note is I was very tickled by, after you beat the game, you can go back to Otto's lab, and if you haven't completed all the puzzles, you go back and you're working on Otto tech, which doesn't really make much sense narratively, right? Because he's already gone, and why are you working on things in his company?
Right.
But there's dialogue that you recorded where he's like, well, maybe this would have helped out Otto and prevented him from, losing his mind in some way. I guess I'm curious, are there any lines that you remember that are, or maybe that are in the game that might be obscure things to find that you think were really enjoyable in recording? Maybe an Easter egg for us to go back and find hidden things of your work?
Well, let's see. I mean, I got to give it to Insomniac for their attention to detail on this game that extends not just through little lines like that, but, little visual Easter eggs and just the detailed city that they created and just filling it with really cool things to discover and find. Because I haven't played through the entire game and I haven't platinumed this and just, zeroed out all of the, all of my lines that I said, it's hard for me to know in the end what even made it into the game. I would love some confirmation from somebody because I haven't played. It was nice after a while. I would occasionally, do the line as written and then ad-lib some stuff. And, more often than not, I mean, I certainly didn't need to. The writing was definitely, there. But occasionally I would get inspired and they were they were beautiful enough to entertain my those moments and occasionally keep them. But I never knew, in the end, because I'm not a part of the that end of production on this game, what was kept and what wasn't. I remember ad-libbing a line later on in the game, way past where I've gone, that came out, "Yippee-ki-yay, mother spiders," and and I said you're probably not going to be able to keep that, and they're like, I don't know, man, we really like it, but I don't know if it ever made it into the game or not.
I don't remember it, but I hope it's in there. Yeah,
"Yippee-ki-yay, mother spiders" is. It was one of those moments where I'm like, oh, God, I hope that makes it into the game.
Well, either way, it's now on the podcast. So
excellent.
It's recorded in some way for people to hear.
Outstanding.
So going through this process must have brought you some kind of understanding about the character of Peter Parker and Spider-Man. And as we've gone through this show, the hundreds of episodes that we've done, I'm like sighing heavily right now. We've learned that the character is a bit elusive, which is to, I think, the character's benefit and why he's really stood the test of time. He's the everyman. He's trying to do good, but he's never perfect. He's responsible, but he's also kind of selfish. He seems to defy any kind of easy definition. So I guess I'm curious, what's your understanding of who Peter Parker and Spider-Man are as characters?
I think you hit on some important things there, and I would add to that I think one of the reasons why this character has stood the test of time and why he is so beloved is that he's not Batman doesn't worry about the same kind of things that we do, and Superman doesn't worry about the same kind of things. They don't have the same kind of concerns, and they either they've got money or they've got this or they've got that. Peter has always been the guy who worries about the same things that everybody worries about. How to pay rent and how to keep his relationship together, and how to take care of his ailing aunt or his elderly aunt, and whether or not people like him, or like all of those things that on a daily basis I think we all can connect to is his bread and butter. And one of the things that, and I know Brian and probably John as well John has definitely brought up in interviews before, so it's not new territory, but they said that something that they realized in all of their experiences with Spider-Man and early Spider-Man stories before ours is that for a good Spider-Man, for it to be a good Spider-Man story, it has to be a good Peter Parker story. And I thank them for realizing that, and putting as much Peter into the game as I think you could be tempted to just be like, well, Peter's not that interesting for a video game. Let's mostly make it about Spider-Man because we really know why people want to play this game. But also that in good Spider-Man stories, when Peter Parker wins, Spider-Man loses. And when Spider-Man wins, Peter Parker loses. And that's a very important equation to keep alive. And something that I hadn't really rationalized before they said it out loud. And there's a vulnerability to Peter. He's a superhero, but he is imperfect and he hurts and he doesn't always know the right thing to do. And he's faced with the kind of decisions and the choices that we all are often. And I think these are all things that people relate to. But he's fun, and he's funny and he's dumb and and he's smart. I mean, I don't know. I just how do you not love Peter Parker?
One of the things I love so much about this game is just how good-hearted it is.
Yeah.
Like being a good guy and actually being a full-on good guy was moving in a way that I don't find often in video games, where you somehow have to, create an anti-hero because they're going to beat up someone, right? So they have to have an edge in some way. And Peter is not that guy. I mean, he gets pushed to that extreme, I think, by the end of the game. But my favorite part of the game is a moment very early on where you save this woman on the street, and then you encounter her at the Feast homeless shelter, and she talks about how Spider-Man encouraged her to come there and turn her life around. And I can't even imagine another game where they even took the time to do something like that.
Yeah, that is Spider-Man, and that is Spider-Man's world, and it is something that they definitely were conscious of that when making this game. We didn't need another dark anti-hero for this game, and you're right. That's a lot of the games that I work on are that, and it was very refreshing it wasn't. I don't think it was any kind of political statement. I think they were just like, hey, there's a lot of dark shit happening in the world and just in everybody's lives, and we need a ray of light. We need somebody who wants to help and somebody who is not trying to put one over you or doesn't want something in return, and we need some fun and some funny and some kindness and some vulnerability, which are things that unfortunately, in today's world, to a lot of people are seen as weaknesses. And I don't think they should be. I don't believe they are. And I believe all those things are strengths and are important. And I want people to help each other. And Spider-Man is your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I mean, he's there to help. He doesn't, sure, he battles his own demons and he does what he does because, he's trying to still, right or wrong, but he's a guy who does, he always wants to do the right thing, and he may not always do the right thing, but he's always trying to do the right thing. And yeah, there's a fun and down to the fact that you can, high five people on the street. I mean, who, it's whereas, if it were like, a GTA type game, you could shoot somebody in the face in the middle of the street. That's that mechanic. And I'm like, can we have a little more of this, please? I like those games as much as anyone, but this was such a, just a loving experience for me that I love that tone for the game. And I love that people are responding to it. I love that people are telling me on Twitter, hey man, I cried during this scene. These, that's another thing. So people, don't tell them you cried. Don't show, that's a weakness. People are opening up, in public and saying that moved me, and thank you for getting me there, for telling that story, for, that reminded me of this, or that gave me the strength to get through this. Games can be more, and we can be more as people. And I think this game really represents the hashtag be greater.
Yeah, and even that initial trailer kind of said it, where he gets knocked down by the multiple villains and finds his way back up. It's literally him pulling himself out of negativity, and it's really nice.
I love Insomniac for making this game, for making that game.
Yeah. So last question we ask everybody that we have on our show who's related to Spider-Man in some way is, what does it mean to you personally that you were able to contribute not only to this game, but to the mythos of a character like Spider-Man?
I'll never be able to put that into words. And my job is literally putting things into words. That is my job. It's literally something I get paid to do. And I don't think I'll ever be able to find the words at how important this has been to me, and what a great honor this has been, and what a career high for me. This is, and a personal high. As an actor, but as an old school nerd, that I have gotten to do this is, I really can't. I haven't yet found the words for it.
Well, when you do, we'd love to have you back on to hear them.
Outstanding. Well, I hope they make a sequel and I can come back on and talk about it more.
Well, perfect. So until then, this is where you get to brag a little bit about what you're doing right now. Where can our listeners find you online, and what work do you have upcoming that we should keep our eyes and especially ears open for?
You can find me fairly easily. While I'm not always on there, because I get caught up in life and can't always be there, but I am most easily stalked on Twitter. You can find me at Yuri Lowenthal. And as far as I'm in the middle of another career high right now. This was a banner year for Yuri Lowenthal. I'm working on a project that I'm also producing called Orbital Redux, which is a live streaming sci-fi adventure show, TV show that is through the Nerdist Network, Legendary's their digital arm. Wow, it's so hard to it's been so hard to explain because people say, well, what do you mean it's live? Well, we perform it live and it's streamed live as we're performing it. And we're like, well, it's a sci-fi show. When do you do the special effects? I'm like, we're doing those live.
Wow.
Like, well, when do you? Well, what about the music? Do you put that in later? No, we're literally there's a band playing right next to where we're performing, and they're scoring it live, and all the sound effects are live, and the visual effects are all live, and all the cuts that are happening, all the editing is happening live, and everything you're seeing, there's no take two, there's no, every episode is one long, nerve-wracking take. Exciting. Sorry, I didn't mean nerve-wracking. I meant exciting. Exciting, and it has been, that having that and Spider-Man in the same year has been. I don't even know how that happened. That's a culmination of a career, a lifetime of stuff. It's I love genre stuff. I love sci-fi and fantasy and horror, and to get to finally do a sci-fi TV show where I play an astronaut and I get to be on a spaceship and do all this stuff has been fantastic. You can go to orbitalredux.com to check it out, and there's it's part of the Nerdist subscription service called Project Alpha. You can also go to projectalpha.com if you want to check some things out. But if you sign up and use the code Orbital, you get a 60-day free trial, which is more than enough time you'll need to watch the entire our entire first season of the show. We've got 2 episodes left to go live next Thursday and the following Thursday. We go live at 5:45 Pacific Standard Time. The whole thing takes an hour, including pre-show and post-show, and it's super exciting. I've never been a part of anything like it. Yeah, it's been, honestly, because nobody's ever really done quite this before.
No.
It is hard for me to describe it to people in a way that they walk away going, I really want to see that because I understand what you're talking about. Mostly they're like, I don't really understand. Maybe I'll get to it later. And I'm like, later's too late, man. It's live.
I'm pretty sure I get it. I have no idea how you're pulling it off.
Yeah,
so
I don't know who said this was going to be okay. I don't know who let us do this, but it's truly an amazing thing that I'm totally in love with.
Sounds really super. Well, Yuri, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. It's been a blast having you.
Oh, thanks so much, Dan. I really appreciate you inviting me.
Well, we'll see you next time.
You got it.
Thank you again to Yuri Lowenthal for joining me on this new episode of the all-new Amazing Spider Talk, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in for this latest episode. In a couple weeks, we'll be making an announcement about the start of Season 3 of our show, so if you haven't caught up with the first 2 seasons, there's no better time to do so. Also, for our Patreon subscribers, please be sure to check out our Patreon page and your entire podcast feed this week, where we've already got special reviews of the entire Nick Spencer run on Amazing Spider-Man, including this week's upcoming review of Amazing Spider-Man number 10. Remember, there's no better place to join on the Patreon bandwagon than following our exciting coverage of this new run of Amazing Spider-Man. Why wait to get caught up in a few months? Remember, for just $3.99 a month, the price of a new comic, you'll get access to our exclusive new issue reviews, B-book reviews, extended interviews, mailbags, and more. And for $10 or more a month, you'll get access to some awesome commissioned artwork. This time from none other than Steve Lieber, the artist from the most current issues of Amazing Spider-Man, and also the artist of the awesome Superior Foes of Spider-Man. Also, check out the Untold Talks of Spider-Man podcast, where the guys are now diving into Christmas-themed Spider-Man comics. I mean, what could be better than that for this holiday season? Plus, we've also got the amazing Spider Slack community for you to join. Just check out this episode's description for a link to join our Spider-Man talking community. Get in on all of that action. And if you want to follow my work, why not head over to Twitter and check out my Twitter handle @SupSpiderTalk. And as we're always sure to remember, our dear Uncle Ben told us, with great podcasts must also come the all-new Amazing Spider Talk.